So first things first, Ryan Day had a press conference and he compared the Ohio State quarterback battle between Julian Sayin and Kienholz to the Joe Burrow, Dwayne Haskins quarterback battle. That's insane. That was his very first year as the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Insane that he is making that comparison. Definitely want to touch on that with you later. Oregon football's five-star recruit suffered a broken leg during fall camp. That would be Trey McNutt. We wish him well. Hopefully quick healing there. Obviously terrible that would happen. On the better news, Jonathan Smith says he is hopeful that Jack Velling will return to practice by the end of the week. Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore says the O-line is pushing their defensive line in a back and forth battle. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Zach, but that was intriguing to me that Sherrone Moore came out and said that. Few more. Ohio State star transfer offensive tackle Ethan Onuoha is rumored to have lost the left tackle position and is battling for the right tackle spot with transfer Phillip Daniels. Now, there is more to the story here. We heard more from the offensive line coach for Ohio State today, and he kind of downplayed that a little bit. So if we talk about that, we'll get there. And then the Illinois wide receivers have been really impressing in camp. Collin Dixon, Hank Beatty, Malik Elzy, how do you pronounce it? Hudson Clement, Justin Bowick, Braden Trumbull, ton of guys. They've all been impressing. They're still looking for that number one guy, but it sounds like the wide receiver core for Illinois is doing some good work. And then just two more. Mark Gronowski, talked about him last episode, Zach. He is as dynamic of a quarterback as it gets, apparently, to the Big Ten Network's Jake Butt. As he can remember, love Jake Butt. He does a great job, and he's interested to see how Gronowski is outside the pocket extending plays this year. And then finally, James Franklin called out a few freshmen for excellent work in a press conference today, and Jim Knowles echoed the sentiment of one defensive end, Chaz Coleman, could be a freshman that I should have included in my top 25 freshmen to watch list if only I'd made that a couple days later. Zach, where would you like to start?
I think Chaz Coleman saw your list and was like, whatever, I'm going to show him up.
He probably did. He probably watches the Big Ten Huddle every night.
Yes, as he should. I think just the first thing that I would want to bring up is it stinks when you're a five-star guy and you expect to get some, at least some reps, and then you break your leg. So, prayers up for Trey McNutt. Feel bad for him.
And he was probably going to get reps this season.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like it's a bad safety room there, but he's a good enough player. He probably would have got reps.
Yeah, he would have gotten reps, and it certainly isn't like a thin room, but there is a reason why they went out and got Dylan Thienemann. And so I don't think I think they could have used him. It's one of those where if Dylan Thienemann goes down, I think it could be rough. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I feel bad for the kid. Like for him, his first year, getting thrown into it, breaks his leg. It stinks for him.
Yeah, it definitely stinks for him, and it stinks for Oregon too. Like I said, he was going to get reps this season most likely. I know I didn't have him on my list, but he was one of the honorable mention guys that I had there that was probably going to be seen at some point. So, anything else you want to get to, Zach?
Well, I'm curious. As you were reading those off, what's your top big piece of news out of all those?
Yeah, I think that the most important kind of game-changing news is the Ryan Day thing about Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins is kind of interesting, but I don't think it's like anything groundbreaking. I don't think it changes my opinion much of the battle. I think, honestly, like the most groundbreaking news in here is Sherrone Moore saying the offensive line is pushing their defensive line going back and forth. Now, when I first heard that, I thought he meant like they're getting a lot of push on the defensive line and they're kind of winning more, but it sounded like when I listened back to it, he was getting at, they're not just, getting destroyed by the defensive line. Like they're kind of holding their own and they're making it more difficult for the defensive line than some people might have anticipated, because there has been a question mark about Michigan's offensive line. They did name a starter, I believe it was today or yesterday, Giovanni El Hadi. He is going to be starting for them at guard. And Andrew Sprague is most likely going to be starting for them at right tackle. However, I don't think he was named a starter yet. But that left tackle position still up in the air. Evan Link, Andrew Babalola. There's another guy in there too. I think it's mainly between Link and Babalola though. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this offensive line. It's normal fall camp kind of question mark stuff, right? Is this the offensive line better than we thought? Or is this the defensive line worse than we thought?
I would tend to think it means that there's a lot of hope for the offensive line, just because we've seen what that defensive line can do. Granted, in very small sample size, but it was against a pretty good offensive line. Well, I shouldn't say pretty good. It was against a decent to good offensive line against Alabama, and they dominated that game. So now, could that have been maybe a little fool's gold? Perhaps. So we'll see. Maybe the bowl game was more optimistic, but I tend to think that the offensive line pushing the defensive line, that is more positive than it is negative, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. I like that. Hooligan reposted the stream. Hooligan, thank you for doing that. We appreciate that. Anybody else out there on Twitter/X, if you want to repost the stream, that would greatly help us. And look at that. We got a Darth Ducky here with us on YouTube. Thanks for being here, Darth Ducky. Love the duck emojis, and the big duck, inflatable duck there that goes on the water. I was upset the inflatable duck wasn't at Vegas. I wanted him somewhere, but it wasn't there. So we'll have to figure out how he gets there next year. Or wherever they're going next year. I don't know where they're going for Big Ten Media Days. All right, one more, Zach. Anything else here catch your interest that you want to comment on really quick?
I'm just glad that Ryan Day didn't say the quarterback battles like McCord and Brown, because that would have given me so much less confidence. So that's my main thought there.
Yeah. I mean, I think from what I was listening to, and I didn't get exactly the whole thing. I was listening to something else while I was listening to it, but it did sound like he was more talking about the competitiveness. He's not trying to compare Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz to the abilities of a Joe Burrow and a Dwayne Haskins. It sounded like he was more talking about just the competitiveness of the battle and how much how difficult it's going to be to decide between the two. But I think, from paying attention to at least what's been said by reporters the past few days, sounds like Julian Sayin's really kind of pulling ahead in this one, and will most likely get this decided, if not something by the end of the week, probably sometime next week for Ohio State.
Yep. So. And then Lincoln Kienholz is going to transfer, and he's going to lead LSU to a national championship. So